Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about improving code. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, what if you're not given time or approval for improving the code? What if the most of the business see any kind of maintenance as a waste of time? Well, I would say that I usually look at this with a bit of this is just based on my experience, guys. So the thing that I have seen happen in the industry, which is something that I find it a little bit fascinating, and I think that it is almost it's a I would go as far as to say I think it's the biggest miscommunication of the entire industry. Because I've never seen a situation where it's not down to differences of expectations on performance or what you're supposed to be doing as a software developer. Let me walk you through it a little bit. So when a software developer tells me, if we take like the developers that I've worked with, for example, when they tell me that, well, we never get any time to make any improvements to the code, and I ask them, how do you know? Well, because every time we ask for a refactor story, or like we ask for more time so we can fix it, or we can do some tests and stuff like that, our product manager always says no. And I go, okay, are you writing tests in the story that you're working on, like when you're actually working, like instead of like asking for a story to do the testing in like some arbitrary part of the code, are you doing the Boy Scouting thing in your story? No, no, not really. And I go, why? Well, because like we're not focusing on testing. Okay. Can I ask you this? Do you think that your product manager wants the code to work? Pretty much everybody says that, yeah, that's probably an expectation. Now, what I argue to you is that that means that you, as the craftsman, the professional, have to know what you need to do in order to ensure that it's always working. But what happens when you say, hey, product manager person, can I get some time to do this thing over here that is really important? What you're basically doing is that you're throwing the question of whether or not you need to do this thing over to the product manager. The product manager wants everything to happen as quickly as possible. And what you're doing is that you're basically presenting a sort of, it's like a construction worker asking the tenants when they're going to build a new apartment complex, should we wear hard hats? Well, if the person on the other side of that conversation goes, no, actually it's going to be cheaper for me if you don't, and people start dying because stuff falls on their head and so forth, whose fault is it? You are the professional, but you're asking a question related to the craft itself to a person who doesn't understand the craft. And when you ask for refactors and these sorts of things, these are definitely things that are optional. But what I always find is that the software developers, they simply ask, like they don't actually just write the tests. How will your product manager know if you're writing tests or not? Because in their mind, it's like if I go to my doctor and I ask for some medicine, then my doctor, I hope, can infer from my desire to get healthy that they should not give me medicine that will kill me. Because if I have to tell my doctor as this patient that, yeah, you need to give me medicine for my headache, but please make sure that I don't die from it, that's something that I'm probably not going to think about. I'm probably just going to assume that they are professionals and they know how to deal with this situation. And that's the thing I'm after here. The situation. Do you know what you need to do in order to make this thing happen? So when you ask for refactors and unit tests and stuff like that, it is usually because you're looking for some want to tell you, hey, yes, it's fine to write your test and so forth. Or in many cases, like you have a mental itch to scratch, which is the most common reason why people tell me this. They complain and bitch and moan and so forth because the code is really ugly and so forth, and they find something they want to fix, and then they just want to sit there and make a bunch of improvements. And I go, you're not going to get that here. But that doesn't stop you from writing some tests for the code and the story that you are working on. The goal, as I've said 100 times before, guys, and this is what I tell the developers in my own team, like you should see the front-end developers that I work with get really sweaty when I say, why are you not writing any tests? I know they never had that requirement on them. They've never had it before, so they never took the time to learn it. And then they start getting sweaty and they go, but that's going to take more time. Well, yeah, that sucks to be you. Because I expect you to make sure that the code is always working, because I know that this code will not work without you doing that, and I also know that you are fine with that, because most people in the industry assume that front-end is always shit, or like all of this sort of stuff. Like, this is what happens. Because you are not writing tests by yourself, because for some reason you assume that you don't have to, because you have to be told to do it, which is, as I said, it's like a doctor having to be told that don't kill the patient. Or as a construction worker having to be told that please make sure that you have some basic work policies that make sure that people don't die on the construction site. That's the craftsman basically just throwing out something that they should be doing because of the inherent value of that thing and skipping it because it's either convenient or because I assume they're stupid, in favor of just ignoring it and then basically blaming the product manager, whoever, to not give them that time, when in reality they have the time. It's just that the thing that has happened is that they will have to get more time in order to finish something up. And it's more common, I will argue, that your product manager or your stakeholders and so forth, like as I said, they don't even think about, they don't know what your work process looks like. They just assume that if you can ship really quickly, then you should ship really quickly. But it's up to you as the software developer to know when to write tests and when not to write tests, or when to refactor, when to fix something, or so forth and so forth. And you can do this. I have never seen it fail in every single story that you work on. That's why I like the Boy Scouting route, because you can Boy Scout your way out of any hole as far as I've ever seen. But most software developers just do not work that way. They this is why I argue, like, some of these people are, in my opinion, code monkeys. In other words, you are like not clever enough to figure out why you're writing tests, because in your mind the test is not something that you should value yourself. It's something that the company, your stakeholder, should tell you to do. And that tells me that you don't actually know why you're writing tests yourself. Because, as I said, the goal is to get the workflow necessary so that the code is always working. And I have never had a conversation with a software team and asked the question, do you think that that it is optional that the system is working? And have them say, yeah, probably. No. There is not a single company, not a single customer in the whole world who would expect you to just go, yeah, I'll just skip all these things that make sure that the system is working, and then let's just cross our fingers that I don't make any mistakes. This is why software sucks in many cases, guys, because that seems to be an option to you as a professional, because you don't seem to be accountable to the fact that you have to make sure that the system is always working. I've seen this in all the way up to the most senior people, guys. They literally give me the excuse when the system is so broken that nothing ever works. They just hold up their hands and we talk about no blame culture and like, oh, we didn't do this. We didn't have the time to refactor and do testing. And I go, I have seen your Git commit history. You have not added a single validation or check or test in years. And you're telling me that it's whose fault, your product manager or so forth, because most people just expect you to do what you need to do to make sure that stuff is working, and you shouldn't have to be told to do those things because you are supposed to be a professional, just as a doctor should not have to be told not to kill the patient. That should not be an option for you. You should know what you need to do in order to make sure that the code is always working. And I promise you, no product manager or no customer has ever gone, hey, the developer needs to do this thing in order, like you basically need, if you just give them the evaluation, if you count for the time that it takes test and you say it's going to take 3 days, How will they know that you could do it in 1.5 days if you just skipped all the quality stuff? Because you're making it an optional thing. That's the problem. You're presenting it as this optional extra, or like a thing that you can upsell to the person as an extra precaution, but that it's not really necessary. It's like insurance for your TV. It's not really necessary, right? Well, sometimes it's not necessary, but it's up to you as the professional to know when you really need the test and when you can skip it. So what I want you to take away from this is that if you don't get time for approvals and stuff like that, it's usually because you're basically making it an optional thing. And I ask always the question, did you add a test to the story you were working on? Because if you're writing new code and you see the system become worse and worse and worse, then you're probably doing something wrong. Because if the spiral is negative on how well the system works, you have to break that. And the way to break it is to actually start doing the sort of quality work that is necessary in order to fix the problem. And you can't just go and ask, like, oh, please, can I have time to do this thing, from someone who doesn't even know what the software development process is all about. And this never fails, guys. I argue that this is the biggest miscommunication in our industry, where the stakeholder sees the system being shit and just thinks that that's the way it works. But the reality is that the software developers are doing a shitty job because they expect to be allowed to do the thing that they should have been doing from the beginning. And I've never seen this fail. When you start introducing the testing, or like you actually start doing it, if you just actually write the test, nobody notices a difference usually, because no one thinks that you're too slow. If you know how to write tests well and you're not really shit at it, which is, as I said, that's the fallout that happens when I work with a lot of developers. They start getting stressed now because it takes them a long time to write tests, and that is because they never fucking practice it. Because for them it's just an optional thing. It's just, as I said, as workplace security for anybody. It's not your customer's fault that you have skipped learning how to set up like a work process where you have a hard hat and stuff like that. If people start dying in your place of work, like with your construction workers, or a doctor performs malpractice or stuff like that, you can't just hold up your hands and say it's their fucking fault for not telling me that I had to do it. You are the professional. You need to know when it's okay to skip something, when it's not really important, and when you really have to do it. You shouldn't even, that's not even a conversation you have with your customer. It's something you have with your coworkers. Have a great day.